How high up does this have to be? Can you hear me now? Good. Wow, is it great to see all of you. Old friends, recent friends, new friends, friends to be, I hope. Like Hank was saying, in 1991, oh, by the way, my name is John Mayer. I'm the executive director of CALI. In 1991, there were 70 people who came to this conference. And the most significant thing I remember about that was in April, we decided to have a conference in June. And we sent out a mailing and said, we're doing this cool thing, save this date, and if you're interested, call this number to let us know. The date was wrong, the phone number was wrong. So we immediately sent out another mailing, and there's something about getting two mailings that creates interest in people. And 70 people showed up to that 1991 conference. Took about 4 years before there were over 200. Took another 4 years until there are now over 400. So I guess we've got a little bit of a Moore's Law working here. And by 2020, we'll fill the earth 16 feet deep with content. Anyhow, I have a lot of sort of housekeeping things to take care of. First of all, I want to thank our wonderful and generous vendors, West Group, LexisNexis, Corel, Matthew Bender, Anlon Systems, and A&D Technologies, without whose support we couldn't do some of the wonderful things that we hope to be able to bring to you over the next 3 days. I, of course, want to thank Chicago Kent and Dean Parrott for allowing us to continue to host the conference here. With this marvelously wired building, which I actually had a lot to do with that, so maybe I'm thanking myself a little bit. But they let us keep coming back. Let me take care of some of these housekeeping things. There's an awful lot of you, and so our biggest problem over the next 3 days is going to be sort of crowd control and body management and things like that. So a lot of these announcements refer to that. For lunch, notice that there are two places to go get lunch. They're both the same, and that all the food there will be the same. It's not like the good food's on the second floor, and the crafts on the fifth floor. So, I tried to think of a different way. A through M go one place. Men and women, people who use Macs and no. So what I want you to do is I want you to randomly disperse yourselves amongst the two lunch lines. So right before you go to lunch, pick out a penny or a coin and flip it. And if it's heads, go to the second floor cafeteria. And if it's tails, go to the fifth floor and get your lunch, okay? I figure that's sufficiently confusing that it will randomize you automatically. If you're going to Blue Man Group tonight, you need to pick up your tickets after 3 o'clock at the registration desk. And if for some reason you don't, well, we'll try to find you on the bus or meet you there. But please try to pick up your tickets, because it would be real chaos to have to give you your ticket as you're walking in the theater or something like that. By the way, the buses to Blue Man Group, buses are going to be a bit of an interesting adventure for this conference. But the buses will leave from Chicago Kent at 7 o'clock. Due to the time constraints and because of the number of hotels, we can't get through the loop of Chicago fast enough just to make stops at the hotel. So we have to depend on you to get to the law school here, and then we'll take you straight to Blue Man Group for that performance. Same thing sort of goes for the Planning His Wake on Friday. We're going to leave from here and walk to the Greek restaurant, the Parthenon. It's actually only about 2.5 blocks due west of here in an area called Greektown, appropriately enough. And then the bus will pick us up from there at 7 o'clock. I have this several times on my list. Don't forget to fill out the evaluation forms. Your feedback is, at least we hope, your feedback is why the conference continues to improve, why we try new things and keep the things that seem to work year after year. The talk amongst yourself sessions was a big thing on the last few years of evaluation forms. Actually, I think it was more people just wanted a breather. The talk amongst yourself sessions, by the way, are exactly what they sound. Talk amongst yourselves. There will not be a moderator or a presenter or a speaker there unless one of you decide to get extremely vocal. And that's okay. The point of it is to allow a breadth of topics to be discussed that maybe we didn't have time or space or speakers to fill in the normal program. Now, some of those talk amongst yourself sessions, you'll notice that there's a little note in there in the agenda that says moderated, and so those are less talk amongst yourselves and listen to this person talk with you. They're almost like a real session, but not quite, all the way. Just go. Oh yeah. I was told to stand real still because the video broadcast then there's less change in the video and the digitization, and that way you can get a higher bandwidth. I'm told that if I sneeze, we lose 20 connections. The labs for all the featured in the labs, there's actually like 30 computers in that lab, and we're going to probably cram about 50 seats, so 60 seats into the lab. Please note that some of the sessions sort of repeat themselves, or that there may be multiple opportunities. And don't worry if you miss or if it's too crowded for one, there will be other opportunities. The conference phone number, if you need to tell somebody how to contact you here, other than your hotel room or something like that, is 312-906-5306. I'll repeat that, 312-906-5306. And probably by lunch today we'll have a message board up and out in the lobby for those types of things. If you're a speaker and you don't want to be real videoed or audio, please let us know. It was my fault that detail was not taken care of, to ask your permission to broadcast those things. The pasta dinner is set up like lunch because of the number of you, but the vendors are in the first floor, and I would ask you to please have something to eat and patronize our vendors on the first floor. Given that there's an hour and a half there, it's a good idea for some of you to go right away and get something to eat and then maybe come down, and others to spend some time on the first floor before you go and eat. Don't worry, there's plenty of food. There's a form, there's a sheet available at the registration desk that lists other activities going on around Chicago, movie times. We're in the midst of Taste of Chicago, which is going on about 6 blocks east of here. It's a giant food fest of 900 restaurants and 2.5 million people or something like that. I'm not sure how much fun that sounds when it's 98 degrees out, so I thought you should know. But yeah, I was driving in today, and the weatherman said it's going to be 98 today, and I started thinking, did Bill Gates buy off the National Weather Service? On Saturday, if you have flights out on Saturday and want to store your luggage here, you can do so in room 155. That's where you all registered from. Geez, I'm not going to have enough time to talk. Don't forget the evaluation forms. Key people besides myself to complain to or to ask questions of or to get help from are Janice, Johnny, Thea, Mickey, and Steve Burke. They're probably rushing about, and so I can't ask them to stand up. But basically, the identifier here, where's the identifier? The identifier here is the blue tags indicate staff, and hopefully staff people can help you find other staff people that can give you what you need to know. Okay? If you want to log into our network, the login name is 98CONF, 98conf. If you want to attach your laptop in any of the 1,500 places around the school where you can do that, it works with a DHCP server, which means you don't have to use an IP number. You would indicate no gateway in the Microsoft IP network setup. I'm assuming Windows 95 here. And that's it for announcements. Let's see if I can get this thing to work now. Yes. Like that. Oh, very good, then. All right. I always like to start with my talks by saying, any questions? Good. So the theme of the conference is preparing for the road ahead. which was a ripoff of Bill Gates' book, The Road Ahead. And you notice that the theme or the icon for the conference is a construction sign, because we all know the future is always under construction. But how do we prepare for the road ahead? Well, we know that the past and the present will lead to the future. We also know that we need to pack a towel, bring clean underwear, bring money. The most important of all things is we need to go there. I'm going to do a lot of this metaphor of traveling and road and future things, so just to let you know, if I sort of slide between and mix my metaphors. So let's look at that. Past and present. It's almost 10 years since all students everywhere, law students, have fairly universal access to Lexis and Westlaw. It was amazing when it was first made available to our students in '89 or '88 or something like that. The PC, this goes back to the Altair and the Apple I, I guess, is 20 years old. 20 years, God, I feel old. LANs are a little over 10 years. I mean sort of Novell 2 or NetWare 2.0. When I first arrived at Chicago, Kent in '87, we were attempting to install IBM LAN Manager. Whatever happened to that? And it's generally believed that there's a lot of pundits who will say that the reason why the economy is doing so well right now is that the productivity time lag of computer automation has finally kicked in. It took industry or the corporate world 10 years to absorb technology, and then it took them another 10 years to figure out how to make use of it in order to improve the bottom line and improve the productivity of workers and things like that. Well, it's going to take a lot longer in education, because education is not a production line or assembly or a factory or a manufactured sort of thing. And changes move quite slow. The web itself is only about 5 years old. You remember Gopher? I attended GopherCon in 1990 up at the University of Minnesota, and the T-shirt had a list of countries in the back with the number of Gopher sites, next to them. U.S. 1,200, Japan 300, and things like that. And the front of it was this giant gopher with he was holding the earth, like this. Every time I put that shirt on, it just makes me laugh. Some things have attained critical mass already within our use of computers in law schools, such as the obvious things: word processing, email, online research. And some things have not attained to critical mass, although I'm trying. CALI, electronic books, expert systems, electronic chalkboards, natural language searching, things like that. Some things are very good candidates for reaching critical mass. And critical mass means it almost becomes, a well-accepted appliance, or something that we naturally assume that everybody will have a basic literacy in. Web course pages are on that path. Exams on computers, and perhaps or inevitably, as Hank would say, distance learning in the future will be something that we will sort of shrug and say, yeah, I know about that. That's always been there. I like to look at this I love this chart that I've built here, because it helps me think about, where we've been, where we're going, in that sort of past-present sort of way. I changed this to, this used to say like history of CALI, but I've generalized it to more of a history of educational computing objects. In the '80s, we programmed custom tools. There was a few of us playing around with those things, fairly small group. In the '90s, we would lend assistance to people who were using proprietary tools, and there was a lot of exuberance and a lot of failure. Artificial intelligence will replace us all, and expert systems we'll be able to teach with expert systems, and multimedia, I'm talking about the first versions of Toolbook, will take over the world, and how wonderful they will be. In the mid-'90s, we basically started supporting people in their own efforts at self-authoring. And it was sort of a back-to-basics movement. Well, what do I want to do? Well, I just want to get something to my students that they can use. I want to take a book and make it a little bit more useful. Or I want to make the course easier to get the information. Or I want to communicate with them better. And in the present, we've sort of got this framework, and maybe this present is even slightly to the past, because things seem to move so fast, where self-publishing occurs. We post our own materials to the website. We don't need the help of either a commercial vendor or even a commercial ISP. And I mean self-publishing maybe at the institutional level, but even at the personal level, quite easy to do. And there's a lot of filling in the gaps going on. The number of web lectures or the web course pages that cover just a myriad number of courses is amazing. The materials that you can look at from Michael Geist's web lectures or Bernard Hibbitz's pages are astonishing, the scope in just a few short years. In the future, or perhaps the present, going into the future, we'll have standards. We're actually at the point where we have standards. Maybe there'll be better consortia, business agreements. I'm going to talk about each of these in greater detail. Let's start with standards. This is amazing to me. I mean, when I started installing computers and things like that, it was ARPANET or Token Ring or, I don't know, Ethernet's that old technology. You know, it had that thick cable. Then they got this new thing called 10-base-T, but nothing runs that fast over a phone wire. You know. And now it's pretty much Ethernet's won the world over. And TCP is ubiquitous as well. Wintel PCs, I don't mean to say negative things about the Mac or anything like that, but it's much easier to integrate Mac and Wintel PCs. And so it's not the big issue that it used to be with format changes and disks and things like that. Microsoft Windows 9X, Microsoft's going to win. I actually think that it's funny, or it's interesting that the Department of Justice is doing what they're doing now, but I don't think it will slow them down one bit. And the good part of that is it's easier to develop for a single platform, and the bad part of it is maybe it will stifle creativity. I guess that's for the industry at large and consumers to decide, but it looks that way for the near and distant future right now. Windows NT taking over, or overtaking, I should say, Novell NetWare. I read a survey yesterday that had asked the top 100 law firms which network operating system they have installed, and the number was, this is the first time I've seen this, 5149 NT over NetWare, and it astonished me. And finally, HTML, DHTML, XML as a sort of a standard baseline text format. Let's talk about consortium. We've already got examples of these things, such as CALI, the Lexis Electronic Office Press. TWEN, the LCC stands for the Law Courseware Consortium, which is sort of a CALI of Britain. The Australian LCC, and other international consortia. I'm going to be attending a conference next week in Stockholm, Sweden, which is called the International Conference for Substantive Technology in Law, Legal Education. And it's sort of like what this is, except it's fewer people, and it's people from probably several dozen countries. And one of the sessions that's going to be talked about is, can we establish an international consortia for computer-assisted learning for things like CALI lessons and e-books? And I'm dying to understand and learn and participate in something like that. International linkages such as the things that Hank talked about, China, Bosnia. I'm sure many of you have institutional things or projects going on along those lines. Virtual universities, such as the Western States Universities Virtual University. California is saying, well, we don't have to be a part of that. We're big enough to do our own thing. So sort of like mini or mega or state consortia, where they're betting that distance learning is going to help them improve the delivery of education to their students. These things will come to affect law schools as well. Public-private linkages in education. You see this a lot in business schools. You see this even in undergrad, in elementary schools and things like that. And I think there may be a future for linkages between companies and law schools, sort of semi-nonprofit or sort of for-profit delivery of legal education. In a paper that I wrote for an encyclopedia of history of legal education, I've included in the materials, and I imagine to a lot of you it's going to be quite scary. And I suppose by saying something is scary, that now everybody will read it. But it's scary because I postulate that there's some interesting alternate futures out there in regards to competition to traditional law schools, and those competitions may come from the for-profit sector, from companies Lexis or West, or even the big 8 accounting firms, or companies like Barbary or things like that, because of possible linkages and because of the lucrativeness of the legal education market. Anyhow, I won't go further than that. Finally, the modular building blocks piece is the idea that we've stopped building these monolithic, or we're not so interested in these monolithic things that stand alone and can only be updated by the person who wrote them with the piece of software that they initially used, the source code, so to speak. Rather, text, graphics, audio, video, all these things are going to be reusable and repurposable. They're automatically cross-platform, they're automatically webbable, they're automatically standalone. And that provides a foundation to build some very interesting applications, or allows us to experiment in a much richer way than we did in the past when we had to start from scratch all the time. This is definitely where CALI is headed. Our strategy is to use and reuse existing content, web pages, instructor materials, cases, case law, statutes, CALI lessons. A Lego model, never start from scratch. Always start from, or to a greater and greater degree, be able to take things and plug them together and not have to use baling wire and chewing gum to hold them together. They sort of know what their interfaces are and know how they link together, and they provide you can then deliver a seamless sort of educational experience to your students. We don't want to do what others are doing well. We don't want to create another web-based course package delivery system or something like that. There's actually quite a few vendors doing things like that. Rather, we want to enhance our own materials and look for linkages or partnerships that will enhance their materials. We want to base our things on non-proprietary standards-based content, HTML, XML. We want to allow local customization, and this may not be real important in the distant future, but in the near future, while we're experimenting, we need to be able to twiddle with the stuff to see if we can find a different way to do it, to make it work for our own situations. So local customization is important. It turns out to be a very tricky intellectual property problem. And so CALI is in the process of securing the intellectual property of its own lessons so that we can then make it available to authors and users to allow local customization to happen. And finally, we need to have a sort of a quality control on this so that the exuberance doesn't lead always to failure, but maybe leads to smarter users or smarter materials, better materials, greater improvements, and things like that. So far, we've got a viewer for our lessons that will essentially come to replace IOLAs that we've been licensing for the last few years. We have an authoring system that's under construction, and hopefully will be ready by this late summer. You can download our lessons and even run them interactively from our website. We have partnerships with West and Lexis that we're working on for the delivery of all of those web-based materials via their front ends of Twen and Lexis Virtual Classroom. We own more than 80% of what we publish right now, and that will probably be 100 by the end of this year. And we have an editorial board in place. It's very active. In the last year, the editorial board reviewed over 30 lessons, which is more than we had reviewed in the previous 3 years combined. Reviewing material is a very laborious process, finding the right people, getting a good quality review, but it's incredibly important to provide feedback to faculty because this is still very much a learning process for us all. This is my vaporware warning. Anytime I mention something on the screen that is something that I'm not delivering yet, I always want to warn people of that, this vaporware. So anyhow, what about packing a towel, bringing clean underwear, and bringing money? Well, I really meant to say we want to prepare for that trip. We want to realize the mistakes will be made, and we don't want to. I hate that when I don't intend something to be a joke, and it is. And we don't want to underfund IT and staff. So let's talk about preparing for the trip. Networks and email should be 24/7. If you're running a network, that sort of comes down every once in a while, and well, that's the way it is. It's an academic network. Stop thinking that way. People are depending on these things with their lives. You have to encourage personal responsibility, people. In some ways, we're near the end of the time of heroes and gurus, and if remember the fourth conference, that silly T-shirt that we had up with the guy holding the flag on top of a couple of computers. And what I mean by that is, it's not that we don't need heroics or quality work, but rather the responsibility for making technology work in legal education is dispersing to everybody in legal education, not just the change agents and the people who attend this conference. And to prepare for this trip, you should train yourself. Every IT department at every law school should have a training budget. There's so many changes going on. There's so many things happening differently that it's vital that you continue to expose yourself to new things. Let's talk about mistakes that can be made. Disaster recovery should be a budgeted line item, and it should be drilled. It's part of that 24/7 idea of a network. You must engage your users and manage their expectations. What? The network's down again? What do I do? Give them a participatory role in the crashing of your network. That's one way to help them understand the grief that you go through. And from Esther Dyson's book, Always Make New Mistakes, which is to say, don't keep making the same old mistake over and over. This is going to be my favorite slide. Don't underfund IT staff. IT jobs are experiencing negative unemployment. What does that mean? That means there's not enough people to fill the jobs that are out there. I've heard negative employment numbers in areas like San Francisco and Los Angeles and Minneapolis and Chicago of minus 10%, which means that universities are bleeding IT staff. Many of you know this first out there from your own experiences. There's intense salary pressure even on public universities and the nonprofit sector. Sounds supposed to come after. And so the deal here is that we should be reducing the low-skilled activities of our IT staff and treating them as, shut up, and treating them more as professionals. That was like wild applause. Yeah, John, yeah. And, you know this. I'm preaching to the converted, right? So finally, what's left to be happening in preparing for our road ahead? Well, go. Go enjoy the conference. All right, we've got 10 minutes for the next.